Good afternoon, and nice to see everybody back. We're going to be entering, say, what we've done is sectioned it off into part 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. over the day. So technically we're in part 3, 130 Cabinet Member for Education, Skills, Children and Young People. I'd like to introduce Councillor Carla Shallow, Sharon Muldoon, Jane Anstis and Finance Business Partner. And Annie Gammon?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Anna. I've missed
Good afternoon.
in front of us because we've lost the two screens in front of us.
We'll get them back on.
Okay. All right. So if I hand you over to Charlotte now, please, and Charlotte will give you the introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So you'll have all heard the phrase unprecedented financial crisis, and I'm sure you're going to be hearing that a lot more over the next few days. And we will have a responsibility to do what we can to help protect the city and the council. Much of the cost from my portfolio are statutory responsibilities, and we, as a city, have a duty of care for our children and that care can't be compromised. From the moment we become councillors, we become corporate parents, pledging to look after our children in care and to ensure that they are safe and cared for. Like many local authorities, Plymouth Children's Services have a number of financial pressures. A lot of these are created by the cost of workforce pressures versus the use of agency staff. This year, we'll have spent £2.2 million on agency spend. We've been working to reduce this cost pressure through a revised workforce strategy and a recruitment and retention strategy. This will take effect the next financial year. An example of this is we've got 15 international social workers joining us in March. Another increase is in the cost of packages of care. We currently have 492 children in care. For the main, many of these children are in stable placements and in foster care. There are, however, a number of challenging dynamics in this space. The cost and use of bespoke packages for children in care, the number of and the cost associated with residential care. We currently have 54 children in residential care and will be seeking to reduce this in the future through more effective edge of support care and returning children home where we can safely do so as long as the child's safety isn't compromised. We've also got the provision for a small number of high-cost packages, mainly for children with disabilities. We also have providers requesting significant increases in the cost of their packages. This has been ranging from between 10 to 20% increase in some circumstances. On a more positive note, our number of children in care has stabilised for the first time in a long time. There is more work to do to ensure our children in care in residential homes are reduced through return home where possible or moved into foster care. From an education budget perspective, there are two key areas of financial challenges. These are our short breaks budget. This is provision for respite care for families with disabled children and activity breaks for them as well. SEND transport, that's one of our pressures as well. Our SEND school transport is currently circa £1 million overspent. The population of this hasn't increased, but the cost of fuel and the provider market has. 2022-23 budget was 4.635 million with a projected deficit of 956,000. Some of our routes have increased as much as 54% in 2022-23, leading to the rise in this cost. We've made headway into savings with projects like moving to Ballard House and closing Midland House. This is the running cost of that is 230k a year currently for that building. Not only does this save us the running cost of that, we're also creating a better working environment for our team and a better place for our children and families to visit. I'll do my best to answer any questions that you may have here in the next hour, but I do have my officers here. I've got Sharon Muldoon, Jane Anstis, and I've just only forgotten Annie Gammon as well, sorry Annie, to answer any questions in more depth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carlisle. Can I open the question to the floor, please? If you can just give us 2 seconds just to take a look. Councillor Boyes, if you wish to go first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that introduction, Charlotte. So Carlisle, very useful. Clearly transitioning young people out of residential care into a place where they're back with their families or in foster care is an ambitious one, delivers some quite considerable savings. Do you see the challenges in this over the next year, 2 years in trying to deliver those cost savings? Is there a cost associated with the transition? And what are the potential risks as well in that area?
I've got a bit of it, but I think if you are happy, I'm just going to pass it over to
Yeah,
Sharon
sure.
because she's
Yeah,
got a
no-
little bit more depth on that
No,
one.
no
Is
problem.
that okay?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, Jane, you might want to come in as well. So, as Councillor Carlisle said, we have currently 54 children and young people in residential care. We will always make the right decisions that's in the best interest of that young person, and their circumstances will be obviously unique to them. So all of those children and young people have an allocated social worker, a team manager, and then a service manager alongside those. So we'll look at those individual circumstances, and we're absolutely doing that at this point in time. They also have an independent reviewing officer, which will also make sure we're making the right decision for them. And many of these children and young people have their own view about what's right for them as well. So for some, it will be wanting to return home. For others, it will be wanting to be in a home environment rather than a residential care environment. For others, that residential care is the appropriate one. For example, it might have education attached to it. So for each and every one of those children and people, we're currently reviewing those and looking at what next for them, how well are their needs being served, and how we might make the changes. So it's a structured programme which we would do through a review of their care plan anyway. Where it's in the right and appropriate circumstance to do that, we will work on a plan with an appropriate timeline that's child-centred, that will consider their education needs, their wellbeing needs, etc. Some of these children may have been placed outside of the city and want to be coming back to the city. So again, that provides an opportunity for us to do that at the right time, at the right pace for the child. Jane, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. I think in terms of additional sort of resource or implication, so no, but I think it's really about working differently and smarter. So a couple of things just to highlight around that we're reviewing is what is our level of support and response to kinship care, so family members who might be able to offer and who might want to come forward to offer care for their loved young ones, young people, but may need additional support to do that. So we need to review that, and we're doing that currently. Also, what's our level of support through our support team? So we currently have an adolescent support team. We're looking very carefully at that model to ensure it delivers the right balance of response for young people at risk of coming into care, and also who might better be able to be cared for at home or within their extended family network, and also those young people who are in our care who could return home with additional support around them in a different way. One of the other initiatives that that has just been launched recently, and you may have come across already, is through our Care Journey strategic partnership with Barnardo's, the Lifelong Links project, which will help us to work with young people to identify much more effectively and earlier on their extended networks and family and friend networks. We know in other areas that has really yielded very significant benefits to young people, both in terms of their emotional connections, but also their future care arrangements. Thank you.
Councillor Poyser, supplementary.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, just trying to ascertain, I suppose the cost that we're having to invest in this particular transition, and what versus what if things potentially go wrong, they're not always correctable, are they, straight away? Because you're talking about a young person's life potentially. You might potentially burn some bridges there with family or extended network or family. So it's not something that can be rushed, is it? So there's a certain amount of cost and then time and investment that needs to go into it. Just trying to ascertain what that is, make sure we get it right.
So in terms of the additional cost of doing this, for the main, the work will be within the existing workforce establishment we have around the annual cycle, monthly cycles of working with our children and young people. There is a small project team that's been brought in to facilitate and organise for this and provide some support around that to make sure that where we need to put the additional time in, that's there and available in order to make those decisions. In terms of a cost of it, I think I'd have to double check. I think it's in the region of around 200k, and that's a bid that's gone through our capital transformation programme piece of work. But for the main, it is through the existing workforce and existing relationships.
Councillor Kelly, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, all. Sharon or Councillor Carr, I don't mind. Rightly or wrongly, Children's Directorate always seems to be under the most pressure, and it would appear that this is continuing with the figures that we've got in front of us. And I know in the past, even with the best laid plans, you can get some very complicated and complex need cases which really blow the budget apart, but it's a statutory requirement. For our own benefit, could you just perhaps make what complex needs means, and the second part of the question is, what are you proactively doing within your remit to try to manage those more effectively from a cost point of view, really, because that seems to be each year the one that skews your budget out.
So it can be many and varied. One of the things that Jane and I have done, certainly in the last few months, is have a look at all of our high cost packages of care and understand the child's or the young person's journey into that scenario. So for some, Councillor Kelly, it will be a children with complex disabilities, and where we'll have a particular health element of the package, and we will work with health colleagues where we can to get funding for that. For others, it might be around their safety and safeguarding needs that might need a higher ratio of staff for them throughout 24 hours throughout the space. For others, it could be a package that also considers specialist educational support. So the dynamics are, again, quite unique, but what we've identified is particularly thinking about our children with disabilities, and particularly thinking about those that come into care because of either a foster care breakdown, or we have parents that are unable or feel unable to support any longer. We've taken some time to understand those individual circumstances and had to think about, well, what could we do differently? How might we have intervened earlier around support and care packages? So part of the work has been around stabilising the system where we can, but also taking the time to identify how support services could be put in place sooner and earlier, and Jane and I are completing that work. It is also the case that we have new arrivals to the city, children that transfer into the city, particularly that can be the case for our children with special education needs. So in some circumstances, it may be that children have newly arrived with a pre-existing package of care and education requirements, and obviously they are new to us, the family will notify us that they're here, and then we need to pick up that statutory duty. So it's not always, there's a number of variables around where these children are and if they are known to us as well prior to the care episode.
What are you doing to sort of proactively try to manage
Earlier support?
And perhaps could you give us some idea of the cost of some of the more expensive packages and how long they likely to last for?
If you're okay, I'll just sort of take over. As we probably know before, bespoke arrangements are the ones that have got the higher cost. So currently, year to date, that's been £4.3 million has been spent on that, and planned budget for next year is 2.5 million. So, but what we have managed to do is we've managed to reduce the amount of children in bespoke arrangements significantly. Currently, we have 5 children in there, and 4 of them have got placements, which is quite a good record if for many of your councillors who will know from previous years. So it's got down to 5 and have 4 placements already there. So we have got 1 child that's going to be there. But as we know, well, some of you may know, bespoke arrangements can range for about, on average, £18,000 a week for them. So to have that level come down to just being 5 and eventually just being 1 is going to make a significant savings for us.
So Councillor Carlow, can you just clarify one particular point? Is bespoke package for 1 child equals how much, please?
It can range from different ones, Chair, so depending on the complexity of their needs as well, but we'd say roughly on average is about £18,000 a week.
Thank you. Councillor Hayden, please.
Thank you, Chair, and my question is to the Cabinet Member. Your portfolio is probably one of the biggest pressures off the budget, and you're probably full aware of that. You also have a high number of agency workers. Now, I know you did talk a little bit right at the beginning of your speech about new social workers coming in, but what other plans are you doing to reduce agency workers, please?
Thank you, Councillor. We are doing a new recruitment drive as well, so to try and get more people, more local people, and get people to work for us as social workers. We can appreciate that it sometimes can be quite alluring to become an agency worker. As Tracy said earlier, before there was, a social worker who was offered £10,000. There's, as a city, there's, you can't compare with that, but we are coming together and coming up with a much more attractive package. Basically, the Plymouth offer here currently is less than our neighbours, which is a part of the struggle, so we will need to improve that. So there will be a cost involved, but actually if you balance that cost against what we currently have as agency costs, it should hopefully marry it down. But we are doing that, especially on other agency pressures that we've got. It's not just like for our own staff. We've got agency costs with foster carers and everything else, and obviously the bespoke arrangements. It's things like with the foster carers, we've got a recruitment drive happening starting from next month to try and encourage people to come back, because actually, as Plymouth City Council, becoming a foster carer here is a really good option. We are increasing on lots of things. The support that we offer as well as a city and as the council is going to be much more beneficial for them. So hopefully we'll get more people in-house.
Supplementary?
Yes, please. I've heard that terminology quite a few times. We're working on a new package, especially in children's services, to be honest. So maybe you would like to elaborate what difference this new package is going to be from the last new package, please, for our social workers and plus our foster carers. Thank you.
I'm just going to pass over to Sharon on some of that. There's some parts that obviously we don't, because it's not been finalised, we don't sort of want to talk about here, but it's certainly something that we can bring straight to you once it has been done. But Sharon, would you like to go in a little bit further?
Okay, so one of the things that we've done is look at the workforce profile and look at where we are using agency and why we are using agency, and also being clear around how that position's changed over time. So for some of our services, really positively, we have a very stable workforce and very low use of agency staff. So it isn't a pervasive issue, but it is an issue in certain parts of the service. So, and to be honest, that where we have those agency challenges are very similar to other local authorities in the southwest and nationally, and they're predominantly in the front end of the services. So perhaps in the initial response teams and the children's social care work teams, the child in need, child protection teams. I will come back onto them in a moment, but important to note, and positively, for many of the vacancies that we have, it's because we have colleagues that are moving to other parts of the service rather than necessarily leaving the service. So from a continuity, consistency point of view, that's really important. However, it remains the case that we have agency use in those spaces. The organisation, and we have over time used project teams to bring a group of social workers in to address maybe capacity constraints in the issue. And again, it's an option that many local authorities have used and do use from time to time. I want us to move away from that and have a much more structured approach. I also know, talking to social workers, and Jane and I have done this through team meetings, that our social workers will talk about they will spend time doing things that they believe others could do for them, so they could spend more time with children. So we will be looking, and I think Tracy mentioned it earlier today, at market for supplement for particular parts of role, but being mindful of public pound and the offer and making sure that we target it where it is most needed and not where it's not. We have looked at our comparative offer, and a big part of it also is our continual professional development and career pathways. We also need to be really clear around the pipeline into social care. So Jane and I have been working around entry posts through family support workers, but also the development of a new post, which hopefully we'll be able to talk about in the next couple of weeks. So it's designed to create a greater stability. It's designed to put the money where it's needed, because a blanket answer wouldn't necessarily resolve the problem and could put more cost pressure into the system. But also fundamentally, we need to make sure we get the pipeline for new social workers resolved, and that will be a marriage of international social workers, which I understand Plymouth has done a long time ago, and I met colleagues that joined us 20 years ago, just last week. So a complement of experienced international social workers who will need time, a development of our own career pathway, but also some clear succession planning routes for example, team managers. So again, talking to social workers, they might want to become a team manager, but it's a big step. And actually we can do more to train them into that and support them through that process. So we'll also be having a team manager programme. So it is a blended offer. Jane and I are just finalising that as well. And our aspiration is that will move us from this space. We have looked at what's happened nationally. So if I use Sunderland as an example, that had a very significant and entrenched agency use a number of years ago. Through the profile I've just given you now, they have a very, very limited use of agency staff. It's also directly aligned to the culture of practice and the leadership environment, which Jane and I are focusing on in terms of making it a safe and supportive space to be.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that.
Councillor Watkins, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question concerns the transport costs for SEND children. These are a large part of the education budget and they seem to be increasing. Have you thought how these can be reduced, and have you thought about whether these can be taken in-house?
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. As you know, that is one of our big pressures, and the big pressure is coming from we don't have as many resources. So in Plymouth, we know that we didn't have as many taxi drivers. Pardon me. And then obviously the cost that we have got is increased up to 54% due to fuel costs. It's one of those things that it would be good to bring in-house. I mean, I always say, you know, if we could do in this country like what America does with the school buses, that would be phenomenal. Unfortunately, that isn't a facility that we have right now, and I don't think it's something that we can bring in-house either. I think it is one of those things that we might have to just ride out a little bit on this one, no pun intended at all.
Just to
Supplementary.
I understand other counties in the UK have got an in-house service for school buses, and I just wondered if you looked into those.
So in terms of understanding the budget, we've linked again regionally with colleagues to make sure that our pressures and our response to those pressures are appropriate and that we're taking the benefit of all learning. We do conduct route optimisation approaches each and every term as our children move through. The number is relatively static, the miles is relatively static, even though the cohort changes. It is, in a large extent here, the cost of fuel that has driven that plus also a number of providers left the market during the COVID period, and then hence we then had the market and financial challenges. We continue to look at it. Our head of service, Amanda Paddison, is contacted and connected with a regional group, and I'm informed that we have looked at every optimisation, including we introduce travel assistance to work with children to promote independence, so that we can look to do that. We also wrote out to parents where appropriate to say, would you consider doing it yourself, and we can perhaps pay you rather than pay a taxi, but we've got to be careful about that because sometimes it's more efficient for those to be on buses rather than individual arrangements. So again, twice this year we've written out to parents where appropriate to ask the question, would you want to do that, and that might help with cost of living. I don't know, Annie, whether there's anything else you'd like to bring to it following your experience elsewhere.
I think the only other thing I'd add is that it's not very easy sometimes to shift things quickly because children go to their school, whether it's the primary sector, and they know they're going to be there for 7 years, and making that journey for 7 years. I think there is probably room to look at the older children and that element colleagues have talked about growing independence. So we want our children, whether they have special needs or not, to become more and more independent and ready for adulthood. So looking at that approach, I think, is important. But again, it's probably not a quick fix there. As the children go through the system, it's looking at those older children.
Councillor Lowry, please.
Good afternoon. There's always been a level of frustration that's existed amongst councillors with respect to the outturn and the delivery of children's services on behalf of the city. With your consent, I'd like to ask you some questions. what is the forecast budget for this year, i.e. the one we're in? What is the outturn? And what is the variance? Okay. And I'd also like to know what you're forecasting for this year's budget to be, please.
Thank you, Councillor Larry. If you give me a moment, I will probably just find that. I've got it in the pack. Is that okay? And I just get back to you? Or?
Imagine I already know the answer to the question.
I thought so.
I'll make it a bit easier for you. Okay, so this year's budget was 62 million. It's forecasted to be 64 million. There's currently a 2.2 million pound overspend, okay?
Yeah.
The budget for this year, which we're about to set in this meeting, is 62 million pounds. Potentially 2 million less than the forecast for the current year. So you're asking us to believe that, noting every year for the past 5 years, this service has overspent between 3 and 5 million pounds. Now, if the answer is yes, I'll buy it, shake your hand and walk away. But I ask you to think very carefully and explain why you are happy to set a budget at less than you're forecasting the outturn for this financial year. Because that's what you're doing, and you're asking us to believe it, noting you've never achieved it to date.
Thank you, Councillor Lowry. And you're right, this is one that has always gone over every single year, and I completely appreciate, as councillors who've heard it many times before, why would you believe us to this day? We are in the middle of changing things in the system as well. The beginning part is going to be the early wraparound care for families. So if we can help families from the very beginning, which hasn't happened before, this might prevent children actually going into care and keeping them in the home. This is something that has been started to be worked on previously, and that Sharon's picked up the reins on very, very tightly. So right now, that is where a big savings is going to happen. Also, because if we can get them out of bespoke arrangements, that will help. The fact that we're getting social workers in and having them in-house. And as Sharon said, once we have got them here, social workers enjoy working with us. So hopefully we'll have the exact same success rate that we had previously with our other international social workers. Those are the certain savings that we are going and we're pledging towards. As you will know, it doesn't happen overnight. A lot of this work was already started to be implemented when Sharon came into position. It will take a little bit of time for it to come through. There has been a massive amount of progress already made, which is why when Sharon was putting together the budget, it felt like a more achievable focus. We know that we've got cost of living increase. We know that our transport parts of it are going to be on an increase, but that's what we're hoping to balance that out with different savings, especially within like our bringing stuff in-house and reducing our agency costs. But thank you very much for the question.
I'm sure all the committee wish you well. And we might need to think about how we're going to reassure us as a committee as to how you achieve that, other than the comments you've made today. Thank you.
Councillor Kelly, please.
Thank you, Chair. I draw your attention to page 15 of the supplement pack. Any business, any organisation can extol change and efficiency where you have a high turnover of staff, because the uncertainty of who's going, who's not coming, loss of experience, people sort of settling back into a team. But probably of all the directorates, because of the emotional side, I would imagine the Children's Directorate is probably the one that's crying out for more stability than any for the right outcomes. So I'm a little bit perturbed to see that 121 employees left PCC, a further 112 moved within PCC from the Children's Directorate, and the turnover is some 16.81%, which by any mark is extremely high. My question is more to Sharon, but I'm happy if Councillor Carlisle wants to come in. You came in relatively recently from another authority. You clearly took the job because there was a challenge, and we took you on because we felt that you were the best person for that challenge. We'd be very appreciative if you could be candid about the good things that you've seen, but what have you seen in your tenure now you've sort of got your feet under the table, that you can pinpoint why that turnover is quite so high and how it destabilises and have a detrimental effect, not only on the delivery of the service, but fundamentally what we're here today is about the efficiencies and the savings, because every time you recruit somebody and they go, there is a loss of production, loss of continuity, and a significant cost. Forget the agency part, that's just on the staff. So if you could perhaps answer that, I'd be much appreciated.
It's always a pleasure to talk about good things, isn't it? So in terms of the good things, there is a lot to celebrate in Plymouth. There is a lot that we need to do, and you're right, it is a challenge. So in terms of the good things, we do actually nationally, and up until recently, our retention levels have been below the national average and below the South West average. We're about the same at the moment. Jane, I'm going to introduce and get Jane to come in a moment, did do some recent exit interviews and talked about those people that were leaving, why were they leaving, and really understand that in the context of our recruitment offer and what we need to do differently. But in terms of strengths and the good things that are happening, we have a very, very committed workforce and there's an awful lot of passion. We've introduced a Star of the Week awards where staff get to nominate people in the team that do above and beyond and exceptional things for our children. I introduced it on the 14th of October and it's an opportunity to celebrate, thank and acknowledge the work that our teams do each and every day for our children in the city. Since that time, we've had over 125 nominations of staff, and they range from, doing Christmas parties for separated siblings so they can get together and see their brothers and sisters, going the extra mile, travelling up to the country to do something, to bring a young person home to see relatives, etc. So the strength and the commitment that is in the workforce is huge, and there really is a sense of team, and we are absolutely getting there. In terms of how we stabilise, it's the things that I described earlier, a really strong professional development programme that makes you feel you can continue to practice and grow within the Plymouth service. It's about understanding why people are leaving, and some of it is the stop-start nature, and it's about setting a really clear pathway for what our children's services look like. We've held a number of workshops through October and November talking about locality working, and I've also listened to schools in terms of what happens when we have social workers moving on. So there are a number of things that we will put in place, both in terms of the service design, how the teams are configured, and it will be around relationships, and it's based on what works in other good local authorities. I am confident in a period of time that our stability in those teams will increase. And at this point, I'll introduce Jane. And Jane, if you could just give some feedback in terms of those people that had exit when we did the exit interview. So we changed the process so exit interviews happen through our heads of service so we could get immediate learning. But also some of the narrative, Jane has informed our recruitment and retention approach going forward. So I'll pass over to Jane.
Thanks, Sharon. Yes, I think, as you rightly say, Sharon, you spoke to very precisely the key priorities that we identified through late last year. So a really unflinching look at what our workforce and colleagues were saying to us about their experience of working not only in Plymouth but actually in social work, because many of these challenges are national in nature and indeed international. And that wider context around sort of COVID and those changed ways of thinking about work-life balance. So all those pressures are relevant to our position in Plymouth. And people told us that, but that work was really derived from listening very carefully to our workforce right across the system in workshops and groups that we devised for that purpose, and also looking at all of the exit interview data, themes and patterns. I've personally, in the time that I've been here, met with every social worker who has been at risk of leaving the organisation or has given their notice. And I can confidently say that the themes that Sharon described are those that are persistently replayed back to us. So people come into working with children because they want to change lives. And the feedback that I have had is that the things that get in the way of that goal and that aspiration for them are the things that make it difficult for them to stay. So some of that is about avoidable administration and bureaucracy. And again, this is a national pressure, and it's spoken about in the independent review for children's social care as well. The time that social workers are having to spend doing things that take them away from direct practice are things that we can, to a large extent, try to deal with. Our professional working culture and making that a thriving environment that's focused on professional development and career development. An inclusive culture that really brings staff in and helps them help us to shape the organisation in the way that works best and will deliver the best outcomes for children. So I think those insights are consistent, and they've been persistently mirrored back to me in the short time that I've been in this role as they were last year. And those priorities are formulated into our recruitment and retention strategy that Sharon's articulated earlier. So I think we have got the right insights and we now have got the right formula in place to really make a difference. It's the start of a conversation for us with staff, and we have set up leading practice groups with staff from all aspects of the service. They begin this month, and they will be again helping us to shape the action plan around recruitment and retention and really ensuring that staff voices influence that journey for us.
Yeah, I've got a supplementary. We've heard with the response, and a lot of the children's outcome is very much about social workers. And if you're a social worker and you're trained, even though you've had a career path through Plymouth City Council, I know the passion, but a lot of it comes down to, from my understanding, the financial package that's available elsewhere, along with the case workload. And when we've just heard about making a difference, if you can manage a fewer children more thoroughly, you get more job satisfaction. What have you done, Sharon and Charlotte? Because this is a national local authority issue, because until the model is changed, you will always have local authorities being a training ground for social workers to come in, gain their experience, for whatever reason, they then move on. And because of the statutory requirements and because of the pressures to recruit and backfill, you will always be susceptible to having to pay well over the odds for the very same social worker that was employed with the local authority now working with an agency. And until there's a collective sort of legislation, that is only going to exacerbate. It's almost like privatisation of social workers, and unfortunately the local taxpayers are the people that have to keep picking up the tab. And that's not to begrudge any child the best start in life, but some of the packages, you know, if you just take an average of 18,000 a week, that's £1 million a year for one child. So it's to try to put it in context about a lot of the other services that potentially can't be delivered because we are being held to ransom. So I just wondered what you're doing along with your sort of peer group nationally.
Yeah. Yes, to a lot of that. So there is, as a region, Southwest region, the Director of Children's Services get together and we talk about the pressures. I keep a very close eye on activity of recruitment agencies, and was in fact speaking to one last week around please don't behave like this in Plymouth, it's not welcome or wanted. And where I can, I'll use my influence. So that would also involve a conversation with DfE, which is absolutely what did happen, and a conversation with that regional DCS to say this behaviour needs to stop in my city, please, in our city. From a regional point of view and nationally, obviously the financial pressures and the impact of the agency market is absolutely understood and documented, and it's part of the wider workforce development programme. As a region, we have discussed a memorandum of understanding where we all agree to certain pay rates and that we hold the line. What tends to happen when an organisation hits a difficult space, then the hold to that position becomes less easy in many respects. So that does have a consequence. What I would say in terms of giving hope, just last week I had notification. I sit on the same floor with the social workers 1 or 2 days a week so that I can walk along, say hello and have chats about how life is. It came to my attention that we'd got a recruitment agency offering quite a high level of hourly rate and saying come and work over here because you can earn more. And the great thing about Plymouth is that social worker told their manager, that told me, and said, and by the way, I'm not going anywhere because I believe this is a place that's changing and I want to be part of the future. So we need to continue with that team culture. And whilst the money is important, one of the packages and conversations I've had with HR colleagues is when you think about our six weeks holiday pay, when you think about our pension, when you think about our approved CPD, when you think about our workforce succession plan, our offer becomes more competitive. However, there are some social workers who, from a lifestyle point of view, will want to come in and come out and do that. I think our offer needs to be come here, practice safely, achieve fantastic things for our children, and know that you can develop your career. And we do have many social workers, speaking to a couple just yesterday, that have been here for 20 odd years and want to stay and will stay. But we absolutely need to make it a permanent offer and attract and keep permanent. We had a director Q&A session yesterday, and I asked colleagues, if you know of people that left Plymouth for whatever set of circumstances, in your network that still live in our city or in surrounding areas, ask them to come back and be part of making our service an outstanding service. We have a long way to go to get there, but we have the desire and commitment, and I do believe energy in the workforce to make that happen.
Councillor Coker.
Thank you. Hi guys. I want to go back to where Councillor Watkins started the conversation on school transport. Okay, we all know it's been a long-standing issue, probably ever since I've been here, which is 16 years, which is far too long. What we've kind of skirted, we've acknowledged there's an issue, but we've kind of skirted over what actually you're putting in place to make substantial changes. Councillor Kelly mentioned about £1 million for one child. We're saying we're forecasting over £1 million on school transport costs this year. Are we factoring in £1 million plus next year? And actually, we need to do something constructive with that, because that overspend is actually taking from where it's needed. So I would ask, I know you're going to answer it today, Charlotte, but it would be really good to have some information about exactly how we're going to deal with this problem, because it does matter and it's really important, and we need to make sure that that's best value for money.
Okay. So David, you just confirm I'm correct at this point. So one of the things that I did upon arrival was do a full cost analysis of the service and looked at historic trends and historic patterns of overspend, where I could clearly see in both the short breaks place and in the school transport place that it had been overrunning for periods of time. And then obviously I looked at the demand forecast figures for this year to see the sort of definition of madness, isn't it? Doing the same thing, expecting a different result without changing anything. So one of the things that I did, I believe it was September or October, David, was ask for both short breaks and transport to be reprofiled in the budget. So because those children have a statutory right to get to school in the way that Annie's just described, and actually we can't change the market forces and the market dynamics. So, and it speaks a little bit to Councillor Lowry's question. So in terms of doing things differently, I liaise with our Section 151 officer to say we need to put this money into the budget, because we have no way of taking that money out of that budget, and it will be a continued pressure. What we will then need to do is obviously identify elsewhere in the service where we will make changes to the budget.
Speaking to David, he can send you over a breakdown as well, so you can have that. If everyone would like that sent to them, that can be done. Okay.
Just a follow-up on that. I agree with what you're saying, but actually what we are saying is, unless we take this situation and stand it on its head and look at alternative solutions, you will be reprofiling your budget for the next 10 years. And are we looking at there are social enterprises there. Access Plymouth take disabled people around the city. What I'm saying is, can we have that overall look to see if we can do things differently? That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, and Amanda Patterson, our head of Send Transport, has that both for the short breaks and for the Send Transport.
Do you want to make that a recommendation, Councillor Coker?
I think it would be interesting for everyone to see that, Chair.
Yeah, so we have a proper review then of different modes of transport, different costings at different cost points to bring forward. Councillor Hayden, please.
Thank you, Chair. And Councillor Coke has more or less asked what I was going to ask was for more of an update on the transport. But as a cabinet member, Charlotte, what are you actually doing? What ideas have you come up to be able to help your service with the transport and short breaks?
Thank you. I remember a while ago speaking when we had Jean Kelly but here as well about doing something like a school bus. Is there something we also work, coming up with working out the mileage as well? There was a time during COVID where each child had to be in, say, separate taxis. Is there something we can put in place and looking at actually getting more children in the same transport at the same time while they're doing to cut down on the mileage? So there has been suggestions that are going through. There are still obstacles along the way though, because some children can't share, some people aren't on the same transport, so especially like trying to get siblings to school as well. Sometimes actually the siblings have been sent to two different schools, so there was a variety of ideas using what we've currently got in place. I mean, as I say, that the dream would be that we could actually get sort of school buses, school transport, and as we all know, bringing more stuff in house helps us a lot better because we can have more control over it. That just I've sort of gone through that and gone round the houses several times on that one previously and found that just didn't seem to be available at all in Plymouth and that services. But the other ways are trying to see how we can cut down on the mileage as well and increase and just doing that type of thing and working with what we've currently got as well, because we can't seem to increase our taxi drivers right now. We can't seem to increase our drivers. So it is a case of what have we got? How can we realistically change this? And it is stuff like that, really. So that's what we've been sort of bouncing back and forth on.
Supplementary chair for you. Thank you, Charlotte. I don't know if you would know this answer, so maybe Sharon might have to answer it. Obviously, you've contacted parents with children that need support for transport for school. You said you've been out twice to parents. What sort of response have you got come back? Charlotte might know the answer. No. Okay, thank you.
I don't know the actual final figure, but I know it was fairly low in terms of take up, but I can certainly get that from Amanda.
Thank you, Sharon. It just, I know it's a legal requirement, but it just amazes me, so many of these parents do have the car and the facility to take, and I know we have to do it, but it's just to see how many parents I would be interested. It doesn't need to be a recommendation, Ross. It's just out of a personal interest. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you very much. Charlotte, we talked about this a little bit this morning, but I think people misunderstood what I was asking about. Small residential units for children that at the moment perhaps we send out of the city or whatever, so that we can have our own small scale homes to provide these residential placements. There's also a money earner in some respects, because you'd be able to have a reciprocal agreement with, I don't know, Somerset, Exeter or whatever. So it seems to me that we ought to really, really be looking at this now in this day and age. And I just wondered, you as cabinet member, how much are you pushing this? And if you're not, please, can we?
Thank you. It is something that we're trying to do, and it's the philosophy of it is very sound. It's something that myself and Councillor Lang are fully in support of as well. I know that we've spoken to Somerset and to find out how they're doing it. We do have some properties that I think we could tap into and we could use around the city, and it would make much more sense for our care leavers to be able to go there. I was actually with the Young Voices yesterday, and that was part of the thing that they were saying, that they would like to live in like an independent living group. There are some of them, like one of them, that's what he's managed to do, but he's managed to secure that himself with help from his PAs. If it was something that we could provide, as you say, financially, it makes sense, but actually for our young care leavers, it makes more sense and it gives them a lot more stability. So 100%, it is something that is still part of my drive, and it's something I'm working with Councillor Lang as well to get that going. And I've been speaking to Councillor Shea and Councillor Bingley as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it does seem a very sensible idea, and I suppose the other thing is that Ofsted have changed some of the rules recently, haven't they, as to how you can manage a unit like that. So, Chair, I'm minded to say that needs to be one of our recommendations, because to me, it's got to be an economy of provision sort of thing that could save us quite a considerable amount of money if we're going on your 18,000 a week, which I'm not saying children going into something like that would be that sort of end, but you never know. So I think it's something to explore. So I'd like to put that. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'd just like to say, I think Sharon, you alluded to that when we've discussed it at the budget meeting once, that you're looking to bring more services back in-house as a result of cost. Obviously, there'll be initial investment, but I think at the end of the day, the cost savings would, for both, well, you can't just put it on cost, it's obviously for families as well, would certainly, would you be happy that we recommend a review of that and you'd be happy to run with
Yeah.
that?
The work is underway,
Work is
and
underway,
it's
is
both for small units, as Councillor Aspinall's described. It's also for thinking about how we change some of our fostering offer for adolescents as well, because it doesn't necessarily need to be a residential unit. It can also just be some very targeted packages within our foster carers. But the work is underway, and indeed Jane and colleagues have been out and are looking at premises.
Does Jane want to come in?
Jane, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I don't think so, Sharon. It is underway, as you say, and I think it's important that we really understand that from a systemic point of view in terms of what our children and young people need as opposed to what the current sufficiency pressures are resulting in. So do we think we need a differentiated offer with a range of different placements and supports, as Sharon's described? Yes, we do. Does that necessarily mean more residential settings? Possibly in a different way as part of our kind of response to support children returning home through our educare response, or through our reunification approach. That's what the evidence and research suggests. But yes, certainly we are doing that work. In fact, I'm visiting things later this week.
Okay, Councillor Lugger, please.
Thank you, Chair. Turning back to the issue of personnel, could I ask Councillor Carlyle to explain the impact on her staff with the closure of Midland House?
Thank you, Andy. It's been positive, all the feedback that we've got so far. I think Midland House served its purpose, but what they are now got the new facilities in Ballard House has actually improved morale no end. I mean, I was sat on the call with Sharon yesterday and we're already getting really good feedback. It's a nicer venue for them to be. You've got to remember, we've got once it's all set up, it's not completely set up, which is hence why we're still using Midland House. Once it's all brought over, I think it's going to be a really resounding success.
Supplementary?
No supplementary, only to say that I withdrew my first £5 note out of the ATM at Midland House back in the 80s.
Councillor Kelly, please.
Thank you, Chair. Page 62, Children's Directorate Savings Proposals, number 2 is saving 2.275, which in essence is bringing more residential care or reduced residential care and foster care back in-house. For any of councillors that have been around for a while, we've always said year on year on year, the savings will be made by promoting in-house foster care, get away from the external agencies. It's a better outcome for the children and we'll save all this money. And to some extent, I appreciate there's a little bit more in that line, but as we've identified, Children's Directorate is the most crucial with regards to budget and the one that consistently goes over, and that means that it has an impact elsewhere. Can you give us the figures on the scheme to date with how many extra in-house foster families we've got, how that compares to the budgeted or planned target of where you would be, and if that's favourable, great. If it's not, what are you going to do, and what's the confidence to promote that further, to think that you're going to hit these targets? Because year on year on year we've put this in, and I don't think that we've ever actually hit the targets to realise the savings, and therefore I've got little faith that anything different will change this year.
So we entered the year with a target, I think, of 450,000, and we met that target. What's happened is that we, as quickly as we've done that, the demand's gone up. So it's about looking at actually then doing more. So the in-year target for recruiting and meeting that cost saving was met. But as I've said, the pressures that have been coming in have meant that we need to do more. So we have we've reviewed our current position. And the mathematics of it in terms of that 2.275 is that and just today I had a meeting where we have 3 children. If we do what it is that we think we can do for them in terms of placement moves, that's £1 million of shift and change in the profile. In terms of our fostering service, we have quite a homogenous offer at the moment, and we need a differentiated offer. I've met with foster carers who work with, do an amazing job with children that have come out of the residential settings into their foster care, and not only hold them in their home, hold them in their heart, and the outcomes for these children are amazing. And I've met one of those foster carers and said, talk me through how you've done that when others can't, and really sat and listened to her about that. What she described to me was, I couldn't do this when I entered the fostering care system, but by growing with you and through you and thinking about therapy and how we support both our children and our foster carers, what more we can do. So our fostering service team, we have a revised improvement plan. So we've looked at this year's target. I can see that we've met it, but I can also see the demand of new entrants into care. So we've identified that actually we need to look at our emergency provision, we need to look at our short breaks provision, and we need to really think about our therapy and the support that we can give our children to keep those placements stable. So Jane and the team, as we speak, are working on a new plan for our fostering service that takes all of the good work that we have done. Jane, you might want to come in around our comparative performance of the region and your view on that. So it has moved on, and we need to move on again with a development plan. And Emma Speakman, our fostering service manager, comes to our DMT once a month with that plan, and we will take that plan forward. Jane, would you just want to talk about our relative performance and how we compare, because that is a positive picture?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Sharon. So yeah, we have done the sort of market comparators. Of course, we're operating in a market that is largely private, commercial, so independent fostering agencies who are also an important part of our sufficiency picture, but also potentially, of course, competitors for people who may be interested in coming into fostering. So when you look at the data regionally for those key agencies, around inquiries and, most importantly, conversion of those inquiries to applications, we come second in a league table of about 10 of those agencies, and that's against some very well-resourced, very commercially savvy organisations. So the work that the fostering service is doing is actually outstanding in that space. We do know it's set in the context, and if you look at the national fostering reporting, it's clear that there is a national sufficiency and recruitment pressure and challenge that all agencies are experiencing. So we're not alone in that. I think what Sharon's described is exactly right. There's more that we can learn on and build from in terms of what we've done well around that differentiated offer, particularly for our most complex, high need young people and those that we would like to support to move out of our residential care and into family-based care options such as in-house foster care.
Sorry, Chair, just it's a supplementary. I use it as a supplementary. Thank you for answering and sharing that. But my question was numbers. So did you intend to have an extra 20 foster carers and you've got 10, or you've got 21, or you've got 31, or did you? That was what I was asking, because whilst everyone's great at the outcome, it's the hard numbers, and I don't know how successful you've been, and this has been going on for a long time, and none of us really know whether it's worked, not worked.
I can't pull those off the top of my head, which is a frustration because I normally can on things like that. But Jane, can you remember those? I'm trying to recall the paper in my mind. We've certainly looked at it at DMT last month.
Rather than put that on the spot, could we make it a recommendation then? Because clearly this is a big fundamental feed into the budgetary savings, that I would have thought that this would have been the focal point that you would have wanted to have got right to secure the savings you sort of forecast, and I don't have the confidence at the moment that that is in hand.
Okay, I certainly think we can make that a recommendation. We just need to be aware we've got 3 minutes left on the clock for this session 3. And there's Councillor Aspinall and
I don't know.
and Jemima. But all right, so it's just Councillor Aspinall before we bring it to a close.
One of the bits of your portfolio is obviously skills and employability. Several years ago, we decided that we would be making sure that we offered our looked after children, particularly apprenticeships within the council. Now, I'm not sure where that's gone because I don't sit on the children's scrutiny panel, so I can't really say that. But are we doing something really positive with this? Because they've had a tough start in life anyway. So what are we as a council doing rather than farming it out to anybody else? You know, can you say to me, Councillor Aspinall, you're asking us to suck eggs, we do this anyway. And I'll be very happy with that result, but I need to know that we're doing it.
Thank you. Yes, we are doing it, is the short answer. But yes, we've got one of our apprentices is come through from as one of our care leavers. We've also just recently advertised a post. We will put people like our care leavers first because that's what we want people to do, part of our care leavers covenant. We'd like all businesses in Plymouth to sign up and do that and give our care leavers a first option. And we are leading the way as Plymouth City Council.
Right, you said one. I'm ambitious. I want far more than one. When you think of the number of looked after children we have, it should be a huger number than that. And you can't tell me within this council organisation that isn't the space to put 20, 30, 100. You know, so I think I want ambition for our looked after children. I want to know that those numbers are rising and that whoever's running Children's Scrutiny is seeing those levels riding all the time. So that's the challenge to you, and it's certainly going to be something that I would like to put in as a recommendation, Chair.
If I could just respond. So in terms of work experience leading to apprenticeships, that is a key thrust for the council, and every directorate has been asked to identify work experience to then lead into that. We're also just about to launch our new NEAT, not Employment Education Training Strategy for the city, where apprenticeships is the key thrust both within the local authority and out across employers in the city.
Okay, I think we'll run with that as a recommendation, to be considered on Thursday. Okay. Needless to say, thank you for coming to the committee today and for your input. It's been much appreciated. And I think we'll take a